The blizzard trapped us in cabin 4. Then, she whispered, they'll destroy my division by morning. The brass key was still cold inside my glove when I opened cabin 4 and found a woman's leather duffel on the luggage bench beside my own black suitcase. Outside, the pines bent under the first red alert gust. Inside, the room was warm, amber-lit, and wrong. I stayed on the threshold with one hand on the iron doorknob. The bed sat untouched against the far wall. The fireplace was clean and ready. My rolling suitcase rested exactly where the resort porter had left it an hour earlier, just inside the entry. But the dark brown duffel did not belong to me, and neither did the leather planning binder on the writing desk. The woman standing near that desk looked up from a folded board packet. She wore a cream high-neck thermal sweater under a loose wool cardigan, dark-tailored jeans, and the kind of calm expression that usually costs someone a great deal of effort. Her hair was wind-touched from the porch, her eyes alert, and her right thumb pressed into the side of her index finger as if she had been holding one thought too tightly for too long. I recognized her from the corporate dossier the resort manager had given me that morning. Madeline Ross, Senior Vice President of Strategic Field Systems at North Star Meridian, one of the executives scheduled for the Glacier Ridge team-building expedition I was hired to lead at dawn. I had expected to guide her across ice and rock. I had not expected to find her assigned to my cabin. "I think the front desk made an error," she said. Her voice was steady, not soft, not flirtatious, just controlled in the way people sound when a problem is arrived on top of 3 others. "They did," I said. "My paperwork says cabin 4. "So does mine." A gust struck the porch hard enough to rattle the door in my hand. Madeline glanced toward the window, then back to me. The storm warning just upgraded to red alert. The front desk closed 30 minutes ago. The resort manager drove the last staff transport down the mountain before the road froze. The lockboxes are sealed, and the lower staff have evacuated. That explained the cabin. It did not explain the board packet. I looked at the folder in her hand, and the corporate problem. Her mouth tightened once. "This retreat was not only a retreat," she said. "Sterling Vale pushed to hold the emergency review here because the remoteness worked in his favor. If I miss the mandatory 10 o'clock board call tomorrow, he can count my absence as non-objection under the emergency restructuring clause." I stepped no farther into the room. "What does he want?" "My division dismantled before noon. 4 regional teams absorbed under his department. 73 people reassigned or terminated. 6 years of field systems work reduced to a budget line he can sell as efficiency." She tapped the folded packet against the edge of the desk. "He has already circulated a proxy packet. My absence is his leverage." There were the anchors. A blizzard outside. A double-booked cabin inside. A boardroom attack waiting by morning. I was Caleb Parker, lead expedition guide for the retreat, not an executive, not a lawyer, and not part of her company's internal war. But I was the person responsible for every guest on this mountain until the resort reopened access. I also had the only satellite uplink powerful enough to punch a stable voice call through a storm cell this dense. That made this my problem before it became personal. I opened the door wider, but I did not cross the threshold yet. "The cabin problem is administrative, not romantic," I said. "My job is to make the boundary so clear that neither of us has to defend it later. You take the bed and the desk. I take the hearth with my Sub-Zero bag. The sofa is neutral space during the day. At night, it belongs to you if you want it. I do not move toward your side of the room without asking." Madeline looked at me for a long second. Outside, ice tapped against the porch rail. Then she nodded. "That is the most practical thing anyone has said to me all day. I get paid for practical." A tiny, tired, almost smile touched her face and disappeared. I stepped inside only far enough to close the door against the wind. The latch clicked with a heavy final sound. The room became quieter, but the storm pressed against every timber. "You are Caleb Parker," she said. "Yes." "The extreme environment consultant?" "Expedition guide is shorter." She glanced at my weather-beaten canvas pack, the coiled rope clipped to its side, and the heavy black pelican case near my suitcase. "You travel like someone expecting the building to give up." "I have met buildings." That got the first real breath of humor from her. Small, but real. I set my canvas pack near the hearth, keeping a wide path clear between my gear and her luggage. Then I checked the cabin's emergency card on the wall beside the kitchenette: generator sector, fire exit, radio frequency, lockbox code that would be useless if the manager had sealed it remotely. Madeline watched the routine without interrupting. That told me something. Most corporate clients filled silence when they felt helpless. She measured it. I keyed the handheld radio clip to my jacket. Static hissed back, sharp and broken. The storm was already chewing through the local band. Mountain operations. This is Parker in cabin 4. Confirmed double assignment and red alert lockdown status. Only static answered. I adjusted the frequency. Again, nothing but the thin electric scratch of weather between us and the rest of the resort. Madeline set the board packet on the desk and smoothed her palm over it once. Attell. Not fear, exactly. Containment. I can call corporate travel in the morning, she said. If the data line returns, it will not. She looked at me. The storm has already put ice on the upper relay tower. If the main data line down the mountain is severed, the cabin Wi-Fi will stay down until a crew can reach the junction box. Which means the board call fails. It means the resort line fails. I set the radio down. Mine does not. If the dish can see south. Her eyes flicked to the Pelican case. That case? Yes? Why would an expedition guide carry a satellite terminal to a corporate retreat? Because executives underestimate weather, weather returns the favor. She looked like she wanted to laugh again, but had forgotten the sequence. The wind slammed the southern wall. Somewhere outside, a loose branch scraped along the log siding with a long, dry rasp. The room's amber lights trembled but held. Madeline picked up the board packet again, then set it down without opening it. You have handled people under stress, she said. I have handled storms around people. The people are usually the harder part. I'm not trying to be difficult. I know. That seemed to stop her. I unbuckled my gloves, one finger at a time, and placed them on the hearthstone to dry. Difficult people try to control the room. You were trying to keep the room from collapsing. For a moment, the only sound was the wind and the low tick of cooling metal in the fireplace grate. Madeline looked down at the packet. Sterling already sent the board a memo saying I pushed for this mountain retreat to avoid scrutiny. He left out the part where he proposed the location and arranged the retreat agenda. Do you have that in writing? Yes. Keep it close. I thought you said you were not a lawyer. I am not, but I know a trap better when I can see the rope. She opened the binder and removed a tabbed section. Then you should see this. I did not move toward the desk. Bring it to the neutral table, I said. You choose what I see. She carried the binder to the dining table and placed it down. I stayed standing on my side until she opened to the agenda. At the top, printed in corporate black, was the emergency restructuring clause. Attendance required for objection. Absence may be recorded as non-objection in cases of duly scheduled emergency review. Sterling had selected a remote resort, placed an executive survival expedition on the calendar, and scheduled the defense call for the morning after arrival. A storm did not have to be planned to be useful. It only had to be exploited. The wind rose again. Madeline's thumb pressed against her finger until the skin whitened. I pointed to the clause, not to her hand. He wants your absence to speak for you. Yes. Then tomorrow, you speak. At 8:14 p.m., the mountain power slain. The lights flickered once, buzzed through the timber room, and died. Darkness dropped so quickly the cabin felt deeper than it was. Madeline's breathing caught once near the table. I heard the sound of her chair shift, the soft scrape of wood against the floor. I had placed the emergency lantern on the kitchen island 30 minutes earlier because the pressure drop was moving faster than the resort forecast. I found it by touch, clicked it on, and angled the beam toward the floor so it would not blind her. The cabin returned in pieces. The table. The binder. Madeline's hand flat on the folder. My gear near the hearth. Outside, the wind screamed through the pines. Well, she said after a moment, that complicates things. Standard mountain weather. I said, the grid dropped. This cabin sector has a diesel backup generator, but the automatic transfer switch did not trip. I pulled my parka from the hook. Madeline stood. "You're going outside in that?" "Yes. It sounds like the trees are coming down." "Some of them are." That was not reassurance. I try not to lie in weather. Her eyes moved from my parka to the dark window. I zipped the coat, sealed the cuffs, and pulled the hood tight. Then I picked up the second lantern. "I need to go to the generator shed and flip the secondary breaker manually," I said. "Before I leave, do you want the second lantern near you on the table or by the door?" The question made her pause. It was small, almost nothing. A choice with no corporate stakes and no board votes attached. But people in crisis need one decision they can make without asking permission from the storm. "Near me, please," she said. I set the lantern on the coffee table within reach. "Done. Lock the door behind me. Do not open it unless you hear my specific voice and this pattern." I knocked twice on the door frame, paused, then knocked once. She repeated it with her eyes, memorizing. 2, pause, 1. Yes. The corner of her mouth lifted. Very dramatic. Very effective. I stepped into the storm. The cold hit like a physical wall. Ice crystals drove into the narrow gap between my goggles and balaclava. The porch boards had already glazed over. I kept one hand on the rail and one on the rope I had clipped to the cabin post before dinner, following it across the buried path to the generator shed. 50 yards in a whiteout is enough distance for a person to become a roomer. The shed door was half frozen shut. I drove my shoulder into it once, then twice. The latch gave with a metallic shriek, and the smell of diesel and old grease rolled into the air. My headlamp found the panel. Main breaker, locked. Secondary sub-panel, tripped. Battery heater, failing. I logged the status on my wrist pad because habit beats memory in bad weather. Then I gripped the heavy breaker with both gloved hands and forced it upward. The diesel engine coughed once. Twice. For one ugly second, it sounded like it would die. Then it roared alive, shaking the concrete floor beneath my boots. When I made it back to cabin 4, the porch light glowed through the snow like a small square of daylight. I knocked twice, paused, then knocked once. "Madeline, it's Caleb." The deadbolt snapped back. She opened the door and stepped aside, giving me a clear path. Warm air hit the ice on my coat. Water began to run off my sleeves in thin streams. The room was lit again. The fire had caught. "You got the heat back," she said. "The generator did. I negotiated. There is coffee." I stopped stripping off my outer shell long enough to look at the counter. A ceramic mug steamed beside the stove. "It's instant," she said. The jar made no promises. I have drunk coffee boiled in a titanium cup with snowmelt and powdered milk from a packet older than one of my clients. Instant is civilized. That time, her laugh lasted long enough to warm the room better than the generator. I hung my parka near the grate, then took the mug once I had peeled off the frozen gloves. Heat pressed into my palms. The coffee was bitter, too strong, and exactly what my hands needed. Madeline wrapped her own hands around a second mug. The strategic binder sat open again on the dining table. Pages were covered in red margin notes and small adhesive tabs. One page had a square of blue tape across the top, as if she had torn it and repaired it instead of replacing the sheet. Pointlessly specific. Human. A CEO of a major division who trusted tape because the page still had work to do. I nodded toward it. "Your 10 o'clock defense?" She followed my glance. For 1 second, her palm moved toward the cover, ready to close it. Then she stopped herself. "My division runs field systems for infrastructure teams," she said. "Remote site communication, modular power, emergency logistics." The irony is not lost on me. The storm is testing your product story. Sterling is testing my authority. She pulled out a printed email. He circulated a proxy packet before dinner. If I miss the call, my absence can be logged as non-objection, and the board can vote to absorb my division under his operational group. When did he send this? 4 hours after the storm warning moved from watch to alert. He knew the weather could trap you. He knew it could silence me. The cabin's log walls creaked under a long gust. Madeline looked at the sealed window, then back at the email. For the first time, Her composure slipped enough to show the exhausted person underneath. If I am not on that call by 10, they will destroy my division by morning. The title line landed without drama. No music, no thunder. Just a woman in a mountain cabin, holding a paper threat while a storm tried to turn absence into surrender. I set the coffee down. Then we build a voice line that does not depend on the resort. The Wi-Fi router is dead. Yes. The main road is frozen. Yes. The staff are gone. Yes. She stared at me. Do you only say yes to problems? No. Sometimes I say, copy that. Another small laugh, tired but present. I pointed to the Pelican case. I have a satellite uplink terminal rated for emergency evacuations, voice only if the cloud layer thickens, possibly file transfer if the dish angle holds. It will be enough to put you in the room. That cannot be in your job description. It is in my responsibility. They hired you to lead an expedition. They placed you in my safety perimeter. I picked up the case and set it on the neutral table. You secure the anchor before you test the line. If your voice is the anchor, we secure it first. Her eyes stayed on me. Not soft, not grateful in a way that asked for anything. Measured. You really think that way? Usually before breakfast. Madeline sat at the table and pulled the binder closer. Then tell me what you need. Clear window access south. A power outlet on generator load. Your laptop, your agenda packet, any document Sterling sent that proves this call was scheduled under an absence rule. Evidence. Always. We worked until after midnight. The cabin became a small operations room. I cleared one end of the table for the terminal case. Madeline sorted the board binder into 3 piles: defense data, procedural threat, Sterling's contradictions. The fire cracked low behind us. The storm pushed its shoulder against the windows and failed to get in. At 1:07 a.m., the satellite terminal locked a weak signal through the southern window. At 1:16, it lost it. At 1:24, I adjusted the dish 2 degrees, braced the tripod with a cast-iron skillet from the cabinet, and gained a stable line. Madeline stared at the skillet. Is that standard procedure? In my field, standard procedure is any object heavy enough to stop expensive equipment from becoming airborne. That skillet is probably older than both of us. Then it has seniority. She wrote skillet brace in the margin of her technical checklist, and the absurdity of it made both of us smile at the same time. Warmth does not always arrive through grand gestures. Sometimes it is 2 tired adults protecting a satellite dish with cookware while an expensive resort fails around them. At 2 a.m, I told her to sleep. She refused. I did not argue. Instead, I moved the thermostat up 2 degrees, poured water into a glass, and set it next to her binder without comment. Then, I returned to my side of the table. Madeline looked at the glass. You notice things. Noticing keeps people alive. I thought ropes did. Ropes help? She drank half the water and turned another page. By 3, the packet was ready. By 3:30. She finally moved to the far side of the room and lay on the bed with her cardigan still on, not under the covers, just resting for an hour with her folder beside her like a shield. I kept my back to her, rolled out my Sub-Zero sleeping bag near the hearth, and set my watch alarm for 7 o'clock. The cabin problem remained administrative. The boundary remained visible. Neither of us had to defend it. Morning arrived gray and sealed with snow. I woke before the alarm, fed the fire, checked the generator load, and tested the uplink 3 times. The signal held, narrow, unfriendly, usable. At 8:30, Madeline emerged from the bathroom dressed in a dark sweater and tailored slacks, hair pulled back, binder in one hand. She looked less rested than polished, but her eyes were clear. On the dining table, I had set the laptop connection diagram, the yellow cable, the printed call sequence, and a mug of coffee. It is aligned and active, I said from the floor, where I was respooling a coil of rope, audio only, no video. The board will not see the cabin, the storm, or the fact that your satellite dish is currently being stabilized by antique cookware. Probably for the best. Agreed. She stood behind the chair, both hands on the backrest. I heard the pause before she said anything. Caleb. I looked up. Do you want me to set the satellite line and stay silent in the room? I asked. Or do you want full privacy once it connects? Her fingers flexed once on the chair. Stay, she said. If Sterling tries to use the storm against me, I want the numbers in front of me. If I lose the thread, point me back to the page. Do not speak unless I ask. Understood. And if the board asks who is in the room? I am your expedition guide maintaining the emergency communication line. True. Useful things often are. At 9:55, the laptop chimed. The sound was small, electronic, and somehow harsher than the storm. Madeline sat. I moved to the far corner of the cabin with my logbook and the terminal monitor, making myself part of the equipment rather than the conversation. The call connected at exactly 10. Voices filled the cabin through the laptop speaker. 12 board members. Sterling Vale, the chair. Legal counsel. No video, only names lighting up on a small black screen. Sterling began with sympathy. That was never a good sign. Madeline, we understand the weather situation is difficult, he said, smooth and theatrical. But the business cannot pause for a storm. We have quorum. If your connection fails, we will proceed under the emergency clause. My connection will hold, Madeline said. It is irregular for you to dial in from an unsecured cabin during a field retreat. The retreat location was selected by your office. A small silence followed. Good opening cut. The chair cleared his throat. Let us proceed. For 27 minutes, Sterling tried to turn weather into weakness. He brought up missed forecasts. Madeline answered with annex numbers. He brought up travel risk. Madeline answered with risk mitigation protocols. He brought up redundancy. Madeline answered with $4 million in avoidable cross-department cost if his plan went forward. Then he shifted tone. With respect, Madeline, you are currently snowed in at a luxury mountain resort while the rest of us are managing a crisis from the war room. That image alone raises concerns about judgment. Her hand tightened on the table edge. The fire clicked behind me. The satellite monitor held steady. I stood, crossed to the kitchenette, and poured hot tea from the kettle she had filled earlier. I set the mug beside her left hand, then tapped once on the bottom corner of her legal pad where she had written, Sterling proposed location, email 742 pump, March 4th. Then I stepped back. I did not speak. She looked down. Her shoulders settled. I am snowed in at the location your office selected. Sterling, she said. And from this cabin, over an emergency satellite link maintained by the guide you approved for the retreat, I am present, on time, and prepared to defend the division your proxy packet tried to silence. No one interrupted. Madeline turned the page. Your restructuring model removes 73 field systems roles, absorbs proprietary training protocols under operations, and records the loss as efficiency. My model preserves all active field teams, eliminates duplicate vendor spend, and reduces Q2 emergency deployment cost by $4 million. Sterling tried to cut in. She did not raise her voice. I am not finished. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Madeline continued for 12 minutes. By the end, the chair asked legal counsel whether absence had been recorded. Legal counsel said no. Madeline was present. Her objection was on record. Sterling's proxy packet could not count silence that did not exist. The vote to absorb the division failed. 3 abstentions. 7 against. 2 for. When the call disconnected, Madeline closed the laptop slowly. Her hand stayed on the lid for 1 beat, then 2. Outside. Snow slid from the roof in a heavy sheet and struck the porch with a soft thunder. I waited near the terminal until she looked up. You won the room? I said. I forgot the date of his email. You wrote it down. I forgot where. You found it. You tapped the page. I pointed at paper. She looked at the mug of tea beside her laptop and delivered tea. Possibly my most advanced technical contribution. That got a real laugh from her, quick and surprised, and then she pressed both hands over her face for 1 second before lowering them again. Not collapsing. Resetting. Thank you, she said. You did the work. She looked toward the window. where snow had softened the whole mountain into a white wall. He will not stop. No, Sterling never loses cleanly. Then we document the win. I turned the terminal monitor toward her. Connection logs, timestamps, signal integrity, call duration. I can export all of it and send it to your legal team when the data line returns. Madeline opened the binder again. The battle had ended. The paperwork had begun. That was how serious wins usually looked. Not triumphant music. Receipts? By late afternoon, the wind returned. It hit the southern side of the cabin in hard, blunt waves, and the old logs answered with deep complaints. The snow had piled waist-high against the porch. The generator kept the lights alive, but every bulb carried a faint tremor. Madeline sat on the sofa with the board packet in her lap, marking follow-up tasks in red ink. I sat on the rug by the fire, running a whetstone across the edge of my primary ice axe. The scrape of stone on steel moved in a steady rhythm with the fire. Then the shutter tore loose. A crack split the room. Glass shattered. The southern window exploded inward in a glittering sheet, and snow blasted across the floorboards. I dropped the axe and stood. "Stay clear of the glass." Madeline was already moving away from the broken window, binder pressed to her side. The exterior shutter slammed against the frame once, twice, then swung open again, pulling freezing air into the cabin. If it ripped completely free, the window hole would keep pouring snow until the room lost heat faster than the fireplace and generator could replace it. I grabbed my gloves and crossed to the wall. The wind shoved the shutter at me like a heavy door. I braced both hands against the wood and forced it back toward the frame, but the latch had sheared off clean. I could hold it. I could not secure it. Madeline stopped beside the fireplace. Her eyes went from the shutter to my gear case. "Tell me what to do." Not help me. Not save me. Tell me what to do. "Top compartment of the Pelican case," I said over the roar. "Orange ratchet strap on fireplace poker. Bring both." She moved. No hesitation. No panic. The snow stung my face while I leaned my weight into the shutter. The wind had a mind of its own, and right then, it wanted the cabin open. Madeline returned with the strap over one shoulder and the poker in both hands. "Feed the strap through the iron handle," I said. "Other end around the center beam. Keep your gloves on." She stepped into the blast, hair whipping loose from its knot, jaw set. Her gloved hands fought the stiff nylon, but she threaded it through the iron handle, looped it around the timber beam, and clicked the hook into place. Hooked. "Poker through the ratchet handle. Use it as leverage." She slid the iron poker into the ratchet handle and pulled. Click. The strap tightened. Again. Click. The shutter drew closer. Again. Click! The wood slammed flush against the frame. The roar dropped to a muffled howl. Snow stopped spraying across the floor. I tied off the loose tail with a backup knot. Then I stepped away from the glass and looked at her. Madeline stood with the poker in one hand, snow melting across the sleeves of her cardigan. Breathing hard from the effort, her eyes were wide, but not helpless. She looked at the secured shutter, then at the tool in her hand. "I think I just used fireplace equipment in an approved structural repair. Temporary structural repair. Very important distinction. Vital." Her smile broke through for half a second. I nodded toward the hearth. "Go warm up, I'll sweep the glass." "No." She set the poker down. "You held the shutter. I'll hold the dustpan." "It is glass. I run a division that builds emergency field kits. I understand sharp objects." "Fair." I found the broom. She found the dustpan. Together. We cleared the floor in careful sections, moving from the window back toward the hearth. She held the lantern low to catch the glittering edges. I swept slowly, not rushing the work. The room warmed again by degrees. When the last shard dropped into the metal trash bin, she handed me the broom without asking where to put it. My hand paused before taking it. The ratchet strap held. Snow melted across the floorboards. The cabin smelled of cold air, wood smoke, and the faint iron scent of broken hardware. Working beside someone under pressure tells the truth faster than conversation. Madeline did not wait for rescue. She listened, decided, and acted. That kind of competence was dangerous to admire. I set the broom against the wall. She looked at the reinforced shutter. Will it hold? Through the night. And if it does not, I have 2 more ratchet straps and 1 more skillet. Your confidence in kitchenware is inspiring. It has never let me down. The laugh came easier this time. After we cleaned up, I took my heaviest wool blanket from my gear and laid it over the back of the sofa. It is clean, I said. I do not want to take your gear. You are closer to the broken window. That is not an answer. It is a geographical argument. She looked at me, then at the blanket. Fine. Excellent. I enjoy winning legal disputes about blankets. She pulled it around her shoulders and sat near the fire with the binder in her lap. For the next hour, silence settled around us again, but it had changed shape. Before, silence had been caution. Now it was shared shelter. I returned to the rug and picked up the whetstone. The fire cracked once. Madeline turned a page on the sofa. I set the stone back against the blade and counted 3 slow passes, keeping my attention on the steel. Not because she was a problem, because boundaries were easier to keep when they became habits instead of heroic restraint. Around 9, she set the binder aside and picked up a paperback thriller from her duffel. I glanced at the cover. Serial killer? Corporate auditor. Worse. She smiled into the pages. Much worse. He uses spreadsheets. I may not sleep. You sleep on ice shelves. I know nature is trying to kill me. Spreadsheets pretend to help first. The cabin felt almost normal after that. Not safe, exactly. Not simple. But human. The next morning, my radio crackled at 6:42. The county plows had reached the upper lodge. Resort staff were returning with shuttle vehicles. Guests would be evacuated in waves beginning at 8:30. The retreat was officially canceled. The phrase should have been relief. Instead, the cabin became quiet in a different way. Madeline stood by the repaired shutter, dressed for the city again, her duffel zipped and standing by the luggage bench. The board binder was packed inside it. The emergency call had been won. The division had survived the first attack. The mountain had done everything it could to force closeness, and we had kept the lines clean. I rolled my sleeping bag, tied off the compression straps, and checked the hearth twice. When the knock came, it was the transport lead. First shuttle for executive group, he called through the door, 10 minutes. I picked up the brass key from the counter. Cold again? Solid. The same weight it had carried when I opened the wrong room. Madeline watched it in my palm. I need to turn this in, I said. Your shuttle will go first. You will be back in Seattle by afternoon. Yes. The legal team will need the call logs. I already drafted the email. Of course you did. She looked out at the white mountain beyond the repaired window. Sterling will try to spin the failed vote as a temporary procedural delay, then send the logs before he sends the story. I will, and when you get to Seattle, ask for written confirmation that your objection was entered before any restructuring motion. I already wrote that too. I looked at her. The tired half-smile returned. I learned fast. So I noticed. The transport lead knocked again. Madeline took one careful step closer, then stopped, leaving the choice visible between us. I know what this cabin could have looked like from the outside, she said. The double booking, the storm, the bed, the closed front desk. The boundary was clear. You made it clear before I had to ask. That mattered. It did. She looked at the brass key. The company trip trapped us in a cabin, but you never used the cabin as an excuse. The key clicked softly against my glove. I held it out instead of touching her. She looked at it, then closed her hand around the bow of the key for 1 second while I still held the other end. A shared object, not a claim. A promise with a key between us. When the dust settles in Seattle, she said, I would like to see you somewhere with working heat, separate rooms, and no emergency restructuring clause. That is a very specific invitation. I've learned to be precise. Good policy. She released the key. I closed my hand around it again. I will be where you tell me to be, I said, after the dust settles. Her thumb did not press into her finger this time. Then I will send the exact location. The shuttle horn sounded outside. Madeline lifted her duffel from the bench. I reached toward it, then stopped. "Do you want help with that?" She looked at the bag, then at me. "Not this one," she said. "I can carry it." "Copy that!" She smiled, opened the door, and stepped into the pale mountain morning under her own power. By the time I turned in the brass key at the transport desk, Sterling had already sent 2 emails. The first accused Madeline of manipulating an emergency communication channel to delay the board's restructuring authority. The second requested a review of irregular conduct at the retreat. He moved fast. So did she. Before the second shuttle left the lodge, Madeline had sent the satellite call logs, the retreat agenda, Sterling's proxy packet, the March email selecting the mountain site, and my signed weather incident report to the board chair and corporate counsel. She copied me only where my technical statement was relevant. No oversharing, no emotional appeal. Procedure? The right kind of wall. 3 days later, corporate counsel confirmed the vote record. Madeline's objection stood. Sterling's absence language could not be retroactively applied. His review request was denied. 2 weeks later, North Star Meridian opened an internal process into Sterling's retreat scheduling and proxy packet strategy. 6 weeks later, Madeline's division received its revised budget without being absorbed. I knew because she sent one short email. Subject: anchor held. Body: the division stays intact. Separate rooms still available if you are in Seattle next month. I stared at that email in a base camp outside Banff for longer than necessary. The wind pushed spindrift across the tent wall. My guide team was asleep. My pack was ready for a dawn climb. I had every reason to close the laptop and return to the life that made distance feel practical. Instead, I opened my calendar. For a man who trusted knots more than invitations, that felt like crossing a bridge. 6 months after Cabin 4, I stood near the back wall of a corporate banquet hall in downtown Seattle, wearing a tailored suit that felt less natural than a harness and crampons. The room was all glass, polished floors, formal black, and low conversation. I chose a spot near the exit out of habit, then stayed there because old habits do not vanish just because a person decides to stop hiding behind them. Madeline stood at the podium beneath a clean wash of stage light. She had secured her division, expanded the emergency field systems budget, and forced Sterling out of the restructuring committee. The official language said he had stepped down to pursue advisory work. The unofficial truth, carried in careful whispers near the bar, was that the board had lost patience with executives who used weather as a weapon. Madeline's speech was short. No sentimental victory lap. No softening the fight. She thanked her team by name. She credited the analysts who rebuilt the projection model. She announced a new field resilience grant for emergency infrastructure training. Then she closed the folder, looked out across the room, and said the line that made everyone stop moving. A division survives when its people can speak for themselves, even when the room is designed to count their silence. Applause rose around her. I did not move. She stepped down from the stage and accepted congratulations from board members, senior partners, and people who had tried to distance themselves from her 6 months earlier. She smiled when required, shook hands when useful, moved through the room like a woman who owned her footing. Then her eyes found mine near the exit. She did not gesture me over. She came to me. The crowd noticed. Of course they did. Corporate rooms document everything. Madeline crossed the polished floor with no hesitation and stopped in front of me, close enough to speak softly, far enough that neither of us had to pretend this was still protocol. "You came," she said. "You sent the exact location. I also sent parking instructions. Those were less successful." Her smile warmed. "You got lost?" "I chose a scenic route through 3 garages. That is a gentle way to say yes. I was preserving dignity." "Whose?" "Mine, barely." Her laugh was quiet, but the people closest to us heard it and looked politely away. For once, I did not check the exit. She reached into her small evening bag and took out a brass key. Not the cabin key. That one still lived on my own key ring, returned to me weeks earlier when the resort sent a replacement as a joke after hearing about the shutter repair. This key was smaller, newer, and tied with a plain blue ribbon. My office annex, she said, separate entrance, working heat, no emergency restructuring clause. I looked at the key in her open palm. You are giving me access? I am offering you a place to leave your gear when you are in Seattle. No contract, no hidden board agenda, no storm outside making the decision for us. Around us, the banquet hall hummed with polite conversation. I could hear, under it, the memory of the cabin, wind in the pines, fire in the hearth, the click of a ratchet strap pulling a broken shutter closed. You waited until the dust settled, I said. I promised I would. And now? She held my gaze. Now I'm asking you to stay with me a little longer. The words did not belong to a cabin anymore. They belonged to a public room, a steady voice, and a woman with no crisis left to leverage. I reached out and took the key from her palm. Our fingers did not need to tangle for the room to understand the choice. The key was enough. The fact that she had walked to me was enough. The fact that I put it on my keyring beside the old brass cabin key was enough. The metal clicked once. Madeline heard it. So did I. You secure the anchor before you test the line, I said. She looked at the two keys together, and I think the anchor held. For the first time in my life, standing in one place did not feel like waiting for the weather to turn. It felt like choosing shelter with the person who had helped build it. The end.